So I want to talk about my long-term ownership of my state bicycle, all-road 4130 gravel bike. I want to discuss what I've changed on it, what I like. Do I still like it? Do I still like the components it came with? And did I make it aggressive enough? Because I came from a road bike background and it's my first gravel bike, but I wanted a full steel frame set. None of that steel frame, carbon fork nonsense. To me, that doesn't count as a steel bike. So stick around if you're interested in this bike. As you can tell, I have completely slammed the stem. I have a negative 17-degree stem on here that's 120 millimeters long. This is a size medium. I am 6'1" and I like to ride frames a little bit smaller than what I'm supposed to. I should be on a size 57 centimeter frame set, but this one equaled out to about 56 centimeters, 55, something around that ballpark. But yeah, I'm really loving this bike. It's a full steel frame set, like I mentioned, and seriously, it makes it so comfortable. People complain about the weight. I couldn't care less about the weight. I actually feel like the weight of this bike makes it more of a solid ride when you're doing gravel. I don't have experience with a lighter bike, but I feel like in theory, it'll just buck you so much that probably would cause fatigue on your lower back and everything. So I'm really enjoying it, especially with the 650B wheel set. I'm really liking how it absorbs a lot of shock, probably including the steel frame set, and overall, probably the entire package is absorbing a lot of vibration and shock when you're riding out here. So with the 650B wheels, they do make the bike sit a little bit lower, and it took me a few months to get used to that and not pedal strike. And one time I pedal struck so hard that I actually hit the crank on the ground. But the point I'm trying to make is this crank set is actually really nice. I feel like it's stiff. It lets you abuse it pretty well. I know that it hasn't come loose or rattled or anything after the abuse I put it through. I've had a lot of rocks kick up and strike it as well, and it still keeps on going. There's no problems there. So the crank set, I'll definitely be keeping on this bike. Now there was a channel that I watched called Locked In, and he discussed this bike. He reviewed, it was the version 1, but it's pretty much the same, the version 2 here. He really liked the bars, so that kind of sold me on that. And I actually really do like the bars. I love the flare of the bars. I love how in the hoods, it's a little more narrow. So when I do get in my favorite position, the aero hood position, I can get pretty aerodynamic. Also, these shifters, I actually really like. The Sensa shifters are great if you're wearing gloves as well. Anywhere you put your fingers on and shift, it's gonna shift. Just my one complaint with the Sensa shifters is these rubber hoods are just so loose. I've discussed them in a previous video. Yeah, I don't know why they haven't produced them where they're more fitted. And then lastly, under the right shifter, there's these 2 nubs that go into the cable routing when there's no cable in there. So I really don't understand the logic behind this, because once you put a cable in there and then wrap it with bar tape, it just creates this bump that if you route it correctly, it doesn't stick up too much, but you still feel it. So that doesn't make sense to me. I hope that they eventually fix it, or hopefully they have fixed it, because I've owned this bike for a year. So if any of you have gotten Sensa shifters recently, let me know if they've fixed the little bump here in the right shifter, because if they fix how loose the rubber is in that bump on the right shifter, I think it would be a perfect shifter set. one thing that I did cover in a previous video was the rear derailleur and the cassette that it came with. I just scrapped that. I'm too aggressive of a rider for it to be suffice. So I feel like if you're a beginner rider, it should be fine for a little bit, but you'll eventually have to change it regardless. So I swapped those out. But what's so amazing is the clutch on the SRAM Rival 1X rear derailleur is so good that I actually took off the chain guide that I had in a previous video. And probably in the span of 8 months, I've only had 2 chain drops. I feel like this is working phenomenally. So the reason I went with a modern gravel bike than a vintage mountain bike and turned it into a gravel bike is because I've heard a lot of testimony that the old school geometry was kind of uncomfortable for going off-road because it was more mirrored towards road bikes. So that actually convinced me to get this because of the more slack geometry. Me slamming the stem and everything still keeps the geometry nice, where it's not overly aggressive where I feel like I'm gonna flip over the front tire every turn I take. And what's great too is I've put a flat bar on this. I can put maybe a 0-degree stem and make it actually more of a touring bike, backpacker, or a rigid mountain bike. This bike is very versatile and I've experienced that, and I still haven't experienced all the options. So that's another reason I'm just really digging this bike and I'm planning on keeping it forever. So I did mention this was my first gravel bike, and I'm discovering a lot of hidden paths out here in Vegas, but there's a big catch. A lot of times you'll go down a path that seems to be like a gravel road or a little gravel path. I think it's called single track. Forgive me for my knowledge with that. But you'll go down it, and then next thing you know, it gets so chunky where it is so hard to navigate. You're going 0.01 miles per hour. Or another thing that winds up happening is you'll go down a trail and then the gravel turns into this soft dirt and rock, and you're just sinking in there. So I'm still discovering this area, trying to figure out the best paths to take. I found this one, but it's really short. That's the fun of it though, is going off the normal trail, finding secret paths and everything that no one knows about, but also getting in situations where you're not sure if you can make it out of the path, or the defeated situation where you have to walk your bike. But still, I'm having a blast. There's one thing I don't like that State Bicycle hasn't put out a replacement part for, is, as you can see right here, the cable is routed through these plastic pieces that do screw into the frame. Because I have modified this to a flat bar setup and then back to a drop bar, I have opened and closed these plastic pieces a few times, and at this point they're pretty soft. I really feel like if I open and close them a few more times, they're gonna snap off, and State doesn't provide replacement parts on their site. So I really hope that they do provide that soon, because once they're broken, I'm just gonna have to jerry rig a homemade cable routing guide here, which I know I can do, but it's just kind of a pain. Or maybe there's another brand that carries these on their site, or I don't know, I'll have to shop around, because once these break, once these go, there's no replacement option on State Bicycle's website. You know, another thing that I discovered is I feel like there's a term called urban gravel riding. And because I live in Vegas, in the city, there's quite a bit of development everywhere that clears out paths that make it a good gravel path. Also, there's tons of urban obstacles that you can't really do on a road bike just because of gearing, durability, and debris that causes flats. So I'll actually show you one that I discovered right now. Gravel bikes are so cool because I am now done with riding the gravel, but now I can go on the road and keep a pretty good pace. Go really fast, actually. There is the stats that a gravel bike's a little bit slower than a road bike, but honestly, it doesn't bother me. I think it's just enough speed where I'm satisfied. Another thing that I just remembered about the geometry is that you're more over the rear wheel, so there's more traction than if you were to go on a, oh my gosh, it is so bumpy. So you'll actually have more traction rather than like a vintage mountain bike where, like I said, it's more road geometry, so you're a lot more forward and less traction on the rear wheel. Filming and riding gravel, this is pretty hard. Also, my brakes are mechanical, they're not hydraulic. I don't know, it doesn't bother me. It stops adequately. I'm used to really old brakes and I'm satisfied with that, so I really don't feel like I'm gonna have an issue sticking with mechanical disc brakes from here on out. Yeah, there's no way I have any need to upgrade or get a different bike. It just hits every bullet point that I wanted in a gravel bike, especially a full steel frame set. The fact that this bike was able to get just aggressive enough to my liking, but then I can reverse and make it a lot more comfortable by getting a 0-degree stem, putting flat bars. It's just such a versatile platform, and I really don't think you can get that in a cyclocross bike. I highly recommend this bike, particularly for people who want durability, who want steel, and beginners too, because you can grow with this bike. You can upgrade as you please. It's not goofy sizing like vintage mountain bikes have weird seat post sizes, where this is 27.2. I love the glitter flake on it, but the dust can block that sometimes. But right now it's looking good. Now with the WTB Byway tires, I enjoy them on the road and light gravel, but boy, do I wash out quite often on gravel, even when it gets a little more loose. So at this moment, I don't have any funds to try a different pair of tires. I'm not sponsored by anyone, by the way, so State's not sponsoring me. Maybe one more modification that I'd like to do is try 700C wheels. I have heard that it can make the bike feel a little more rigid on gravel. You gain a little bit of speed, but I mostly want to raise the bike just a tiny bit because like I said, I have pedals struck in the past. I'm not doing it now, but rocks do tend to hit the cranks. Maybe 700C will solve that, but I think at this point it's negligible. Now, in regards to that urban obstacle that I was talking about, this thing is huge. I have 42 tooth front chain ring. The lowest gear is a 42 tooth in the back, so it's a 1-to-1 ratio. And check out how hard it is to climb this hill. What I mentioned earlier, more specifically with the 650B wheels, is because you can run a lower tire pressure and your tires are fatter, so it disperses the weight of you and the bike a little more evenly. And with the urban gravel, you're in the middle of nowhere and there's still glass, there's still debris. So exploring on a road bike, you're just more prone to getting more flats. Whereas exploring on a gravel bike, I haven't had a flat, honestly. I've said this in a previous video, hopefully I didn't just jinx myself, but I really haven't had a flat and I've rolled through some pretty sharp debris. Hopefully I covered everything in this video. If I missed anything or if you have any questions, feel free to comment below. Again, I am not sponsored by State, so this is my own opinion of this bike and my experience owning it. And lastly, it's a really good option if you're on a budget and need to get a gravel bike under $1,000, but I think you might cross over that just a tad bit if you want to upgrade the derailleur, which I think is a necessity, the rear cassette, and also the tires. eventually, the original tires were pretty good. Once again, thank you all so much for subscribing. It really means a lot. I'm enjoying making these videos, and hopefully it's entertaining. Let me get on the concrete here. I'm getting a little too fast to keep the camera stable, but thanks again for watching, liking, and subscribing. Stick around, I'll definitely be making more videos, and I'll catch you next time.